Hello everyone, this is Eva Nolik-Smith with Yoga U Online, and I'm very excited to be here today with author and yoga therapist Robin Rothenberg. Robin is an internationally respected yoga therapist who runs registered training programs for teachers and therapists through the accreditation of the International Association of Yoga Therapy. Robin's background includes extensive training in both the Iyengar yoga tradition and the Vinaya yoga tradition with Gary Kraftsoff. And her teaching is also influenced by Nishela Joy Devi, Richard Miller, and Swami Satchitananda. Robin has been really, I think, one of the very early pioneers, Robin, in training teachers in the therapeutic applications of yoga. For well over 20 years, and she has also been involved in several research studies on yoga therapy, particularly she's well known for her work with lower back pain. You can find Robin online at is it essentialyogatherapy.com
or eyt.yoga.
All right, and as you may have guessed, she is the founder of the Essential Yoga Therapy Training Program and also the author of the book, the Essential Low Back Program, Relieve Pain and Restore Health. Robin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
You bet. Pleasure as always to be here, Eva.
So you have an amazing amount of yoga training behind you, but I know that you have recently launched on a new adventure and become very interested in something that's not 100% yoga, although it's very relevant to yoga and the practice of yoga. So tell us about your new adventure.
Right now, I'm immersed in this intensive study on the breath. And what I have learned in this last year as a result of studying the Buteyko breathing method with a great deal of knowledge and with a lot of science behind it. And I also have gone back to the original teachings in the yoga texts like the Yoga Sutras and Hatha Yoga Pradipika and the Yoga Rahasya, and these texts that talk about the breath, and everything that they're teaching is what I have learned not from my yoga teachers but from my Buteyko teachers, that actually they are congruent, whereas the contemporary transmission of pranayama from my yoga tradition teachers, not so much.
Interesting.
Yes.
Can you give an example?
Right.
Well, first of all, tell us about the Buteyko method and how you encountered it.
Yeah, so I think it would help if I started with the personal piece, how I came to it, because it wasn't like I was necessarily looking for this, but what happened was a year ago in the fall, so fall 2015, one of those horrific respiratory infections that was going around and knocking people down came my way, and it completely knocked me. I was one of the first to go under early in the fall, and I couldn't stop coughing and I couldn't get better. And I tried everything that I knew how to do, and it just wasn't working. And I was literally up every single night. I had to kick my poor husband out to the guest room so he could sleep, because I was up all night, and I was trying to do different breathing techniques in different positions, and I couldn't lie flat at all. So I was doing, restoratives. I was trying to bring all my yoga toolbox in, and nothing was helping. And I finally went to my naturopath, and she did the spirometer, where you blow out. And she was like, "Oh my God, Robin, that's terrible. Do it again." And I did it again. And she said, "Robin, you have asthma." And I was like, that is so not happening to me. So I was like, I don't know, I'm just coughing all the time. She goes, no, you have asthma. And so she prescribed a reliever medication. She said, "I don't think it's really going to help, but try it for a couple days. And then if it's not working, call me and I will prescribe a steroid inhaler." So I was really, I mean, I was so wiped out. I had absolutely no energy. I was exhausted all the time. I couldn't, as soon as I started to talk, I'd cough. So I couldn't really teach, not to mention it's really not, like you come to your yoga therapist and she's like, coughing all over. It doesn't look good. So I started using the inhaler, and it definitely did help some. Well, actually, it helped a little, and then I got the steroid, and that helped definitely bring the inflammation down so that I would have periods where I wasn't coughing so much. But here's the thing. About 20 years ago, one of my very first yoga therapy clients was a woman named Pippa Corelli. Now, Pippa started working with me when she was in her 60s, and she had severe asthma. She was so bad that she literally had her inhaler on her sticky mat because she was so easily triggered that she wouldn't even put it down. It was like with her all the time. And I remember her saying that she had a terrible time trying to control it. Her chest, everything was so tight. The yoga helped her tremendously. And then she started doing massage. She started doing acupuncture. She looked at her diet. She was doing all these things. And every little bit was helping her to get her asthma more under control, except that she was on the 4 highest levels of medication, 4 different medications at their highest dosage. And she was still ending up with full-blown asthma attacks and in the hospital. Wow. And so by the time she was about, I think, like 68, her doctor recommended the Buteyko breathing method and said, I don't know what else to do with you, Pippa, but I've heard good things about this for people with asthma. So from the outside, I watched this woman who I had already known for many years struggling and, certainly on a path of healing, but not getting to a point of health. I watched in a year she completely freed herself of all medications. And when she was 70, she went trekking in Nepal with her brother.
What? Oh my God.
So this remarkable transformation. And she would come to my classes. I was teaching Vini Yoga at that point, so everything was very breath centric. And she said, I'm not going to do the breathing that you teach. I'm going to do my own breathing. And I said, fine, whatever works for you. And I was intrigued. And so I asked her about it. And she actually came and did a couple of informational sessions about Buteyko for my studio. And I attended it, and I thought the science was very interesting and the physiology. And in fact, we've incorporated a big portion of that in our therapist training and in how we talk about the importance of CO2 in the breath equation. And still, in my rather arrogant, egotistical mind, I said, that's nice for her, but I do pranayama.
So God had to bring the hammer, huh?
So I got sledgehammered pretty big time. So basically, my naturopath said, you have asthma. And I said, whatever, I'm calling Pippa. So I called Pippa and I said, Pippa, now you have to teach me how to breathe. I've taught you yoga for 20 years. Now you have to teach me how to breathe. And so I did. I went in and I did the series with her, 5 sessions with her. And this is just a little drop in the bucket. I have been a snorer my whole life. I had adenoids and tonsil issues when I was a child, and my brothers used to tease me about my snoring. My husband, God bless him, who's lived with me for almost 40 years, sleeps fine through my snoring, has never complained about it. When I had this respiratory infection and I was coughing so much, I started having apnea, and I would literally feel my throat closing off as I was going to sleep. Very terrifying. Okay, so my snoring got worse. My apnea, I don't know that I had it before, but I definitely had it then. So I went to see Pippa. I did 1 session with her, and I started the practice. That night, I slept. I woke up the next morning, and my husband said this to me. you really gave me a scare last night. I had to poke you a few times because I wasn't sure you were alive. You were so quiet."
That's so funny.
First night. First,
Wow, amazing.
that's how hugely transformative
Right.
it has been. So
Interesting.
my coughing, my chronic cough that I've had my whole life since childhood, gone. My energy level is like, if this is low and this is high, it hovers here from morning till night, day after day after day after day. I
Wow.
soundly, I wake up, I have energy all day long. If I start to drop, I do my breathing practice and it bumps it right back up. I have joked with my friends that I feel like I've gotten smarter in the last year, but it really has to do with getting more oxygen to my brain. So I think more clearly and more efficiently. And from the yoga perspective, the vrittis are very quiet. There's just
Interesting.
what's happening right now. It's like there's not a constant buzz in the back of my head.
Wow.
And my digestion works fabulously well. I have more aerobic capacity than I have ever had in my life. In fact, I really think I have had asthma my whole life, but I haven't been a wheezer. I've been a cougher. But
Interesting.
it was undiagnosed. But I
Yeah.
had this chronic bronchitis my whole life, and I think really what it has been is asthma, and it's made me very aerobically limited. Now I run up the hill in the back of my house that I have walked trudgingly up for, the 25 years we've lived here, and now I sail up it, and I don't have a moment of breathlessness. It
Wow.
has transformed every single aspect of my life, and like I said,
Amazing.
I was so amazed by the effect on myself that I flew last April to Ireland, to Dublin, to study with Patrick McEwen, who's one of the top Buteyko practitioners and teachers. And I did the week-long intensive training with him so
Interesting.
that I teach this to my students
Yeah.
and support them and my clients. And so that's been so much of my year has been about that. And I now feel that it's such an important message to convey to yoga teachers that we have to get our breath facts straight, because what we're teaching with big breathing is actually really unhealthy. It's really bad for our system.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I'll get back to that point because that's intriguing. But I also do want to know the Buteyko method. Who was it founded by, and what is?
Where did it come from? What's it all about?
Yeah.
Dr. Buteyko, Konstantin Buteyko, was a Russian physician, and he was working in a critical care unit, and he noticed that everybody in there was basically terminally ill. So a lot of sick people. But he noticed something that was very intriguing to him, which was that the people who were breathing really heavily and quickly and erratically, heavy, quick, and erratic, that they required much more medication and they died sooner. And the people who, in spite of their illness, had more of a quiet and steady breath, they seemed to fare better and live longer. So he started asking the question, is the disease driving the breath, or is the breath driving the disease?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yes, so then that started a whole level of inquiry, and he began to study the yoga texts and some of the other traditions where breath has been a very critical part of the practice. And he started experimenting with himself, and he had high blood pressure, and he was able to bring his blood pressure way down and by changing his breath. And so he built a whole science and methodology around this and used it to first and foremost work with asthmatics and people with COPD and breathing issues. But then he also noticed that, yes, it was also good for cardiovascular issues, and it was also good for people with chronic inflammatory issues like IBS and headaches and, he's chronic fatigue, and then looking at the science and what's actually happening with the ventilation perfusion and the balance between CO2 and O2 levels, and how by manipulating the breath, you manipulate the gas exchange and what's happening physiologically in the body as a result of that. And I think what we looked into through Western means and Western scientific analysis is exactly what the yogis came up with, which is it's not about breathing in more or out more. It's about retention of the breath, retention of prana. It's all in the kumbhakas. It's all retention, and it's about making the inhale and the exhale as small as possible and making the breath as quiet as possible so that there's less prana moving out and surging in, and more of building your pranic vessel from the inside and filling it and utilizing it to its potential, which, if you think about it, is actually a much more yogic idea. What we need is out there, and we have to get more in, and we have to put more out.
Is this something you do like as part of a practice, or is it something you do like all day long, or how does that work?
Yes and yes.
Oh.
So, I always talk about it like formal practice and informal practice. So, this is what I say to my clients too. Like, I'm writing out a practice on the piece of paper, right? This is your formal practice to do whatever it is, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. But then the informal practice is staying conscious and aware all the rest of the time.
Interesting. Right.
So in that same way, Dr. Buteyko and the Buteyko teachers say a minimum of an hour a day, formal practice. And then, of course, be conscious of how you're breathing all the rest of the time. So I can break it down, and of course I'm going to go more in detail in the webinar, but the first and foremost thing is to breathe through the nose and stop mouth breathing. Now, here's what I can say from my own experience. I was a great nose breather while I was on the mat because all my teachers taught me to breathe through my nose. That was not that different. Like, of course, I do my practice, I breathe through my nose. What I wasn't aware of is how much I was breathing through my mouth all the rest of the time. And I'm a teacher. So what do I do all day long? I talk, which is a lot of talking. And when I'm in the middle of a sentence and I just gasp a nice big in-breath and then I gasp another in, I'm breathing too much. It's basically, we're talking about low-level hyperventilation is what's happening. This is the idea behind Buteyko, is that over-breathing, is as much of a burden and disruption to our physiologic homeostasis and balance as overeating.
Interesting.
We have this idea, and very common in the world of yoga, that the more breath, the better. But as it turns out, there actually is an optimum amount of breath and an optimum rate of breath. And although in yoga we slow the breath down, we don't address volume. So we slow the breath, but it's a big breath in and a big breath out. So we can breathe slow and still be hyperventilating. So breathing through the nose 24/7, and I had to teach myself how to speak.
Well done.
Putting those pauses in and breathing through the nose. So I'm not over talking my breath, right? And I had to learn how to breathe less, a lot less than I was used to. And as a practitioner of the breath and big breaths, it's actually harder to retrain yoga people than non-yoga people. Non-yoga people find this to be much easier than trying to make their breath bigger because they already don't have a big breath. But yoga people who've trained in this kind of muscular breathing, like it's all about how big you can make your rib cage and all that, by the way, that does not have anything to do with efficiency of gas exchange. You could have a barrel chest and have lousy gas exchange, and you can have a tiny rib cage and have good gas exchange. So they're not the same. So we're a little confused on that one piece too. So in terms of our physiologic health, bigger isn't better and more isn't healthier. In fact, less and quieter, silent, in fact, no ujjayi, but silent breathing, very still, very slow is the healthiest.
So is this like a natural reduction of the breath becoming more subtle and more refined? Because if there's one thing you cannot manipulate, it's the breath.
Actually is very manipulatable. I've been manipulating it intensively for the last year, and I can tell you can manipulate it. But here's the thing, Eva. The medulla and the brainstem is where the thermostat is set for our breath rate and our breath volume. And what it's sensitive to, how it picks up its cues, is by the amount of CO2 we have in our system. CO2 is very, very critical to our health and well-being. CO2 is the determinant on whether or not our body is well oxygenated. Our oxygenation level in terms of whether there's blood flow to my pinky fingers and up into my brain is not dependent on getting more oxygen in. It's about how much CO2 I have in my system that will allow the oxygen that's in there to be released from the bloodstream into the cells. Okay? The brain picks up its sensor on how much CO2 is in our system, and that determines the breath rate and volume. And we can grow our CO2 levels back up to what they should be, which is really what Buteyko breathing is about. It's about taking people out of hyperventilation, which means breathing more than our metabolic production of CO2. That's what hyperventilation is. So it's about bringing our CO2 levels up to normal volumes so that we can function in a healthy way.
Yeah. So then you don't feel that kind of need for air that you otherwise easily can get if you're like doing pranayama and you're counting to 10 on the in breath and counting to 10 on the out breath, and after a minute you want to just run out of the room.
Yeah, so here's the thing, Eva. Actually, this is an incredible tapas. You know the term tapas? It means to heat or to cook.
Right.
It's the requirement for transforming our patterns in yoga. Well, we breathe somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 times a day, especially if we're big, fast breathers, which most people are. So that's a pretty big pattern to transform. It requires a lot of tapas. So yes, it actually means just like going, have you ever been on a diet?
Oh yeah. We all been teenagers, let's face it. Sometime way back.
Let's just say that you were used to eating 5,000 calories a day.
Right.
Okay. Now, we know that's way more than is necessary, and not only that, but it's unhealthy to eat that much. It's a burden on the system. If you cut back to 4,000 calories a day, which is still too much, right? Are you going to feel hungry?
Yeah.
Yeah, and for a while, right? Until your system acclimates to 4,000. And then if you cut it back again to 3,000, are you going to feel hungry in that transition? Yeah. Right? And then eventually you get to 2,000.
Right.
You have to do it notch by notch. And there's some discomfort and there's some craving and desire, raga, a little attachment to the way it used to be, till the body acclimates. Now, even though we know in our head, this is more food than I need, and I'm on this diet because my doctor says I have to get down to 2,000 calories a day, and I'm making my way down. So I know logically I don't need more food, but my belly is telling me to eat more because I'm used to eating more. Well, it's no different as we do breath reduction. We put ourselves on an air diet, and there's some discomfort in the process of re-regulation. But in that process, that medulla, that thermostat begins to shift, and it begins to say, oh, apparently this person wants to breathe like this as opposed to like this. Everything else lines up behind it.
Interesting. So have you been using this in your work with your clients, your yoga therapy clients, and in your trainings?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's been a huge tool. In fact, I had one of my yoga therapy trainees shadowing me last week, and she's been working with this. In fact, I just hosted my teacher from Ireland, Patrick McEwen. I just hosted him to do a practitioner's training here for the people in my therapy training, because they all want to learn how to do this and be able to really offer it in the full extent to their clients. Anyway, she asked me, she said, what did you do before Buteyko? And I said, I don't even know. I know I would have done something with their breath, but I would not have been able to understand completely about why it is I'm choosing what I'm doing, why it is it's working, why it is it's having the effect. I now feel like I have so much more confidence and true understanding, not just, well, this is what my teacher said to do. This is just how I learned pranayama, which is actually not a very solid ground to stand on.
Good point. Well, Robin, it just sounds very fascinating. And now, of course, I want to hear about the course you will be offering on Yoga U Online about this topic and how you will go about it, what you will be covering.
So, first of all, I want to, I'm offering this in the hopes that it will pique the curiosity and interest of the yoga teachers and practitioners who are participating. And I want to say that I am a devoted student of yoga, and one of the first things that I had to do for myself was I felt the experience, I learned about it from the Buteyko side and the science, but I was going like this in my head, how could yoga have gotten it so wrong, right? Like it didn't make sense to me, because in my experience, whenever I've gone to the teachings, the universal truth of them just holds through no matter what, right? I can lean into them. So I was quite concerned that somehow they were wrong. So I was greatly comforted, and I hope this will be a comfort to my colleagues and peers and friends out there, that I went back and I studied in depth what it says in the pranayama text. And actually, this is a big piece of what I'm going to be sharing, is not just like, this is Buteyko, but this is what I learned from Buteyko, and this is where it dovetails with yoga. And actually, we're not moving away from yoga. This is not yoga. This is actually getting back to the original intention of the yoga practitioners, the yoga teachers, the masters who wrote about pranayama and how pranayama could be this amazing transformative experience and practice. And I've actually had the experience now of everything that they said happening in the text, but never really experienced before. Yeah, I'd get a little calmer, a little perkier or whatever, but it was short term. This is a long-term transformation that has happened by reducing my breath and working much more explicitly and intensely with the kumbhakas, particularly hold after exhale. So I'm going to be very much linking it to the yoga text, and then offering up some of the basics around the breath physiology, and taking people through just the beginner step, like you can just put your toe in. We're going to do the diet from like 5,000 calories to 4,500. Right? So we're going to stage it down. I'm not going to go into the intensity of the practice that we do through Buteyko, because it wouldn't feel ethical in this kind of format to do that, but to give a taste, a flavor. And then the practice that we're going to be offering is one taking it into asana practice, doing the reduced breathing and taking it, maintaining that in asana practice, which for those big breathers who like to do that intense ujjayi in their asana, it'll be a challenge to be silent and small and steady and maintain that through larger movements.
Interesting. Very fascinating. And how quickly, when you started, when you had the asthma problem, how quickly did you feel the problem dissipate, the coughing go away?
So within the first 2 weeks, my coughing had dropped about 85%. And you understand I had been coughing for 4 months at that point.
Oh, wow. Wow. Yeah.
And not able to stop it. And even the inhaler, which would give me a little bit of temporary relief, I didn't have the sense. My airway still felt very inflamed and irritated. And that inflammation and irritation dissipated within 2 weeks, and then it's continued to stay low level. And one of the remarkable things for me is that when I do my long trainings where I'm teaching for 10 days straight, after about day 3, I would start coughing. And by the end of the workshop, I was like downing Ricolas and doing and drinking water and just anything to try and keep myself from coughing through my lectures. In May, so I started in January 2016, and in May 2016, I taught every day except one. I just, don't even ask me about who schedules my life. She needs some help. But anyway,
you have a wicked boss who is the same as me, right?
I know. Because we keep saying I need to fire her. But in any case, in May, I taught every single day, and I didn't have one single coughing fit, which is as close to a miracle in my world.
Yeah.
Between that and my husband saying, "You're so quiet at night," and I sleep so much more soundly because I'm not snoring. But I do tape my mouth every night just to let you guys know that's coming. Because we have to control our breathing to make sure that we're nose breathing, not just during the day, but also at night.
Yeah. Wow, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And such a great thing that you found a way to connect it with the yogic teachings, because it sounds like there is a piece there that we have been missing, in a sense, that has the potential also to enrich our asana practice in a number of ways.
Absolutely. And take us back to, as I said, our origins. You know what I say, Eva? There's this game of telephone. The game of telephone?
Yeah.
I tell you and you tell her, she tells him, and what comes out at the far end is not even close to what the original story was. So I think over the thousands of years, there's been some things lost in the transmission. And I think, and not with malintent, please understand, I'm not in any way passing judgment. I think we all do the best that we can do with what we know and what we understand from our teachers. But we also have modern society. And this is one of the things I'm going to be talking about, or what impacts the breath. And it actually turns out that everything impacts the breath. So the quality of our soil and our water, not just our air, and our diet and our stress levels and our lifestyle, which is so very different from where the yogis started from in terms of the quality of their breathing and what was impacting, how their breath was being impacted by their lifestyle. So we're starting in a different place than where they were. We're not starting with healthy functional breathing. So if we're coming in stressed and with low levels of hyperventilation, and then our yoga teacher says, and we start running all of that breath through our system, it disturbs the gases even more. Instead of bringing things into balance, it's actually taking them farther out of balance.
Interesting. Yeah.
So, and I'll explain more of that.
It's the physiology of it is going to be very interesting. And of course, one thing everyone's going to want to know is what's the difference between this and diaphragmatic breathing, which has always been the holy grail of yoga.
Well, this is very much about diaphragmatic breathing, but so definitely the diaphragm is where we want to be working from.
Yeah.
But it's the muscle that doesn't address quantity, volume, or rate.
Mm-hmm.
That we have control over.
Mm-hmm.
And the yogis figured that out, and they figured out that if we could control our volume and rate, we could control our entire life, mentally and physiologically, and our health.
Hey, I'll sign up for that one.
All right. Let's do it.
All right, Robin. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for doing this pioneering work and bringing it to the U.S. It's a relatively obscure method, but it sounds like it has tremendous potential.
It has, not only does it have tremendous potential, but I personally believe that it's the yoga teachers and the yoga therapists that will have the greatest impact because we are teaching the breath all the time.
Already, yeah.
We get our breath straight,
right.
And we really understand what we're doing and how we're communicating and teaching people to breathe. We can have a tremendous impact on people's stress levels, people's health, people's sense of well-being in a much more profound and lasting way than what we're doing now. So I believe that we are the ones that can make the most impact, but we've got to be willing to go back to kindergarten on it. I was, and it's okay to admit that we didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
There's more to learn. So being open and curious to learning more.
Yeah. No, it sounds absolutely fascinating. And hey, who doesn't want to check off 20 years and turn the clock back? Well, Robin, thanks again for joining us, and we'll really be looking forward to the course. Great to talk with you.
You too, Eva.
All right, take care. Namaste.
Bye-bye.
Bye.